The easiest way to describe what the Aftermath campaign is, in the context of Gears of War 3, near the end of the game, Marcus and Dom go off in one direction toward Azura, and they send Baird and Cole off to find some supplies.
All right, Baird, Cole, you go find reinforcements. We need transport, weapons, and anyone who can fight.
It just so happened that they went to Havel Bay to go find those reinforcements, and so we had all the pieces kind of put together, and it was like, you know, let's go tell that particular story from Gears 3. You run into Paddock, who's one of the new characters in Judgment, because he's still hanging around that city.
Only cog soldiers are this noisy.
Paddock?
That sidearm can go back where you found it.
I think it's really neat to see Paddock inserted into this point in the timeline of the Gears story. And it takes you back, and I think it's a point in time that everyone's going to be excited to see. Ultimately, it's a reward for fans.
Paddock is a Groznian guy. He's kind of the grizzled veteran, former UIR soldier, right? So yeah, he was opposing the COG in the Pendulum Wars, and then when the treaty was signed, right around the time of Emergence Day, he came over to fight for the COG.
Again, it's just a continuation of the story, and just peeling back the onion layer just a little bit deeper to see what else happened during that traumatic time.
We built Aftermath in as an unlock. And so to unlock it, you earn stars. When you play through the main Judgment campaign, you're scored every section that you play through. We have a series of 3 stars that you can earn. You earn those stars by getting ribbons, you know, headshots and executions and those kinds of things. Also just by playing through the mission. If you take a Declassified mission, that will boost your stars.
The declassification system changes the way that you play. It's an optional system that you can choose that'll actually add challenge and make it even more intense than it previously was. It also changes the testimony and changes the way that the story is told.
The dust gunked things up pretty good, and the grubs were going in for close kills. Basically,
the very core, the very foundation of what we're trying to do in Judgment is all built on intensity. What led up to that is we had a lot of feelings that games get a little bit too easy these days, right? It's more about the experience as opposed to the challenge. To make it more intense, there's some specific things that we did. One of those is the smart spawn system, and so this was a whole thing that we engineered so that when you get into a battle, when you come into an encounter, what you face will be different every single time.
You might play through once and get, tickers and maulers as you kind of like lay back, and then you play through again and you push forward, and now you have wretches and different enemies flanking you. So lots of intensity happening in this game.
Systems like the Smart Spawn system are really cool for us as designers. I mean, yes, it's a challenge because it forces us to think in a different way. In the past, we could always say, okay, X, Y, Z is going to happen, and then when this ticker explodes, then the door is going to open, and a boomer's going to walk out, and we can script that experience. So it forces us to rethink a lot of the combat scenarios. In a way, I really like that because it gave us the ability to put more story and more context into the environments and into the world itself, which really helps bring the universe to life a lot more. And I think that's a much better story than any one we could ever tell, because it's a story that the player themselves gets to tell and experience.
For us, it's a process of evolution. We don't want to just give the same experience over and over again, because that's really an injustice to the fans. And we want to make sure that we're delivering something that's progressing, not just both from a story standpoint, but from a franchise standpoint, but also from a gameplay standpoint.
All right, we're going to go, what we're going to do right now, the community has just voted on the gameplay they next want to see. We're doing this live. This is live television. We're kind of going by the seat of our pants. What you have chosen on Twitter is Domination. So Chris, Alan, let's bring up Domination here in the studio. We've got some gameplay here, and I want you to talk us through what we're seeing. Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, Domination is a brand new mode we have in multiplayer, and so this is kind of an evolution of King of the Hill. You have 3 rings that are static on the map. These don't move around like they did in King of the Hill. And then your team's goal is to go capture those rings, and while you're holding them, you earn points, which you can see up there in the upper left-hand side of the screen. And the first team to the score threshold will win the match. And so what you have is it's a bit more competitive than what we had in the past. And we have these really close matches when we play tested in the labs back at Epic. You always know, by having those rings static on the map, and you know where ring A is, ring B is, ring C is, you always know where the action is, you always know where the fight is. And I think that's really one of the beautiful aspects of this mode. You always know where to go to get into the battle.
Well, I noticed that Domination is that, you talked about where to go within the battle, but it's a choke point. Everyone's being brought there, so you're going to get action on the way there, and then once you're there, it's nonstop, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, that we've added to all of our multiplayer modes is this new vertical nature to the gameplay. So yeah, there's choke points, but it's no longer just a flat plain choke point. Now people can run upstairs, drop down, and flank you and surprise you. And so there's this whole new nature of strategy to the maps by adding this vertical nature to them.
Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned playtesting earlier. How important is playtesting to a mode like this?
It's massively important. I mean, you have to get the balance right. And so, particular to Domination, when we play test, a lot of it is the location of those rings.
Right.
We want to make sure that the battle is not only fair between the 2 teams, but they're in the right locations where you set up really good fights. So for example, this room here, you have 3 entry points. And so when you have one team defending in the middle, you have to kind of make sure you're watching all those entry points.
And you've got some pipes you can duck behind.
Yeah,
as well.
you take cover, of course, and find some really good places to kind of bunker down and defend, which is really important.
Now, so you mentioned there's 3 rings. How does the gameplay progress in terms of the balance, and do I get one, do I move to the other? Tell me a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategy involved in how you do that. So typically, there's one ring that's kind of near each team's spawn points, and so those are more easily captured, and then there's one that's kind of more in the middle, and then there's a lot more contention for that. So there's a lot of strategy and communication that has to happen to decide how you can essentially hold 2 or more of the 3 at all times so that you're accruing points faster than the other team.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, so we just saw him jump out of a window there, and that was something that Alan was referring to earlier, is this new verticality that we have in our maps. And we also have a bit new approach to level design, which really favors a mode like this. It's a much more circular in terms of its movement, and so you find it's a lot easier to move around as a team and find those choke points and find those battle areas.
Let's bring up Dynamic Defense right here in the studio for the folks at home. What are we seeing here? Here's the gameplay. Why don't you guys describe what we're taking a look at?
Yeah, so one of the big fan favorites from previous Gears of War titles was this idea of a defense scenario. And so what we've done is no longer, yes, part of the campaign you're charging through and conquering, but part of the campaign also, the Locusts are banging on the doors and they're encroaching upon you, and it's up for you to defend yourself. So we've added, as you can see, they're placing these new gameplay mechanic, which is a placeable sentry, and we have a couple of different types of sentries that have different ammunition types. And so it's up to you to defend your position within the map, and as the Locusts are coming upon you, to actually place the sentry, repair it, feed it as you need to, and ultimately survive so that you can continue.
You're gonna end up having to defend against multiple waves of locusts. They're gonna kind of attack you in these waves, and you're gonna get a little break. You're gonna have time to kind of reset your defenses, think about your strategy in between those different waves, which really adds a nice element of strategy to it.
So this is kind of a tower defense type thing in the campaign where you stop down and kind of have to defend this. One thing I noticed here is that as a player, you can pretty much set down the turrets anywhere. How does that affect the spawning system and the gameplay?
Yeah, that plays really well into our new dynamic spawn system, where if you push the sentries forward, the spawn system, it might react to you and spawn different types of enemies and flank you. And if you stay back and try to hunker down, they might come at you with a full frontal assault. So lots of variation and lots of strategy to be had with this new gameplay mechanic. I
want to talk a little bit about the turrets that we're seeing us lay down here. What are the different types of turrets we have?
Well, first of all, you'll notice you have to manage them. They run out of ammo.
Yeah,
so you need to go up and reload them. Yeah, you have to defend them because the Locust will try to destroy them. But you have a couple of different types. So you have a Nasher type, which is a shotgun type of a sentry, so it's going to blast a little bit of a wider radius. And then you have the assault rifle sentry, which has a longer range. Will give a good string of bullets on those enemies, but it'll run out of ammo a little bit quicker as well.
There you go. That's dynamic defense. All right, now we get to the answer of the most asked answer and question for the Gears of War Judgment, and I got to ask this: what did you guys do to my horde mode? What the hell happened? Survival is the answer, and we're going to have to take a look at this right now.
Gears has always been a cooperative game at its core. I mean, even our campaign was designed around cooperative play.
The #1 question I get is Horde mode coming back? I get that every single day on Twitter, so I couldn't wait to actually talk about survival. The base goal of it is you are defending a series of objectives, playing as the cog, and you get to use the classes that we have in Overrun. So you have the engineer, you have the soldier, you have the scout, you have the medic. It's all about teamwork of what classes you're going to pick and use their special abilities to help survive 10 waves of enemies.
It shares the same kind of like gameplay mechanics as Overrun. And so there's 3 objectives, a primary, a secondary, and the third one being the generator, right, or the main objective. The battlefield is single directional, so you start defending the first one, and then when that falls, you fall back to the second one, and when that falls, you fall back to the final generator.
In Horde, we had 50 waves was the goal to survive, and so you might hear 10 waves and go, wow, that's short. It is 10 crazy intense waves, and it's actually really hard to survive those 10 waves.
We actually had to bring in QA to ensure that we weren't going to ship a multiplayer game mode that it was impossible to beat on the highest difficulty level. Going all the way to hardcore or insane is definitely going to be a challenge for any co-op group who wants to try to tackle it.
I think the key abilities that you're going to see, if they're used well, give you a big, big advantage.
If you have an engineer who's repairing a fence and the Locust forces are incoming, there's no way he's going to be able to repair that fence. And so you've got this moment where all of the classes are doing their thing, and it's all to protect the one engineer who is staying alive and not slowing down and not reloading and doing all this to save that one barrier that's protecting your objective.
It's different every time. You know, it's going to be a different experience every single time using the smart spawn system. As you're changing and trying to figure out the best way to beat it, the game is changing on you, and so you're constantly having to adapt and figure out, oh man, we thought this was going to work, but now that it's different because, you know, we're facing different enemies. How are we gonna team up and actually beat it this time?
There's a lot of just little ways that they can work together and complement each other that make that so much more valuable than, hey, everybody just runs in with their Lancer and shoots stuff. The 10 waves, the 3 objectives, it all kind of worked out to be kind of that magic sweet spot where the intensity level was just right, the length of experience was just right, the number of people involved was just right, and it just turns into this great experience.
All right, now we still have one more gameplay showcase to highlight, so this time we're going to take a look at the Declassified missions. Guys, let's bring that up on the studio in here in studio for folks at home. Tell us about the Declassified missions and what that means.
Yeah, so declassification system is a completely new system specific to the primary campaign of Gears of War Judgment. It's an optional system. So what you saw was that crimson omen on the wall indicating it's available to you, and there's 40 plus of these available to you
throughout the campaign.
Throughout the primary campaign.
Okay.
And these declassifications do 3 things. One is they change the rule set. So what you're seeing right here is that reduced visibility and the enemies are meleeing you.
They are rushing right in on us.
Because this player's opted into it. The second thing that it does is it increases challenge, and so you see the star system on the top left where it's counting up your kind of performance. Well, if you opt into the declassification system, it gives you a star multiplier, so you earn more stars, which in turn means you get a whole bunch of additional content. You unlock additional content that way. And the last thing that it really does is it changes the way that the story is told. And the idea that Kilo Squad is being judged through a tribunal, well, the declassification system will change the story. If you don't opt into it, you'll just hear the normal testimony. But if you opt into it, you're going to hear a change in the testimony, a change in the VO about, hey, this is what really happened during that period.
And you mentioned something interesting there is that Barrett's giving his testimony, and you're actually playing that out as the story progresses, right?
Exactly. As you play through and as you're giving your testimony, you get to play as the different characters giving their testimony. So you're going to hear the judge say, hey, we asked you to do this thing, and you went off, but it went horribly wrong. Recount to me exactly what you did and why.
Now, I want to get back to the declassified missions here. Tell us about some of the different variables. We're seeing, obviously, there's a fog here, kind of like we have in the studio, and some short-range weapons. But what are some of the other variables that players are going to encounter in the game?
Yeah, you'll see these environmental effects like fog or smoke. We'll Some of them limit the weapons that you have available to you that you have to use to get through the mission. We have time-based ones, so having to get through it in a certain amount of time. We might throw a different set of enemies at you, like an additional set of a certain type of enemy. They really do change the game quite a bit. And what's great, like Alan said, they're optional. You can try it with it, and then with our system, we have a really easy way to go back and just replay a chapter. So maybe you can go try it without it. Maybe you thought you just want to see how it goes without it.
Now, you guys have played them all. I want to ask you each one. What's your favorites, Alan?
The timer-based ones are a lot of fun because there's already this sense of intensity and urgency, and it's just amplified.
Right.
When you know that the smart spawn system is trying to adjust to you, and now you have a timer restriction on top of that, it's really intense.
All right, there you go. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, actually the one we're watching is one of my favorites. You get this dusty room, and it's really hard to see. And so it changes the way you play the game, especially the way I play the game. I tend to be a little bit more further back, and I like to shoot the guys. And now all of a sudden I can't see, and they're right in my face. And
They're rushing at you.
Yeah, I have to change the way I play the game, which is great.
Now, what happens if I don't want to opt into this? You just keep going. How does that impact?
Yeah, you know, you'll still get the main story, and you're still going to play through. You're just not going to get that additional challenge, and you're not going to get that a little bit of additional storytelling to kind of help flesh out the full thing for you.